Hello everyone. If you've ever been stung by a bee, you know how terribly bad it hurts. This may make viewers squirmish. Back in the early 80s, I don't know how old I was under 7 years old. I know that for a fact, but I don't recall the exact age I was. I just remember my cousin, who was older than me at the time, was 11, 12, 13. And there was something going on at my grandparents' house. It was like a get-together. I remember wearing this little spring, floral dress. So I'm not sure if it was a holiday or Mother's Day. And my older cousin had a friend with him, and they were around the same age. So they were about twice my age or so. And my cousin invited me outside to play with them. So I gladly skipped away from my grandmother's living room, went out onto the four-season room, and then down the back stairs. My cousin led me around the house to the back, where there was this old, deteriorating stone wall. And some of the stones had become loose, and my grandfather was actually in the middle of fixing it all. And my cousin said, if you step on that rock over there, butterflies will fly out. Well, I believed him, and I wanted to see me some butterflies. So I said, oh yeah? What colors? And I got all happy and excited. He said, all colors, all kinds of butterflies are going to come out of that rock. You just have to step on it. It's like a magic button. You tap your foot on that rock, I guarantee you, they're going to fly out of there. Being a little kid, being naive, I went over to that rock. And I didn't just tap my foot on it. Oh no, I really wanted to see this butterfly show. I jumped on that rock and I put my whole body weight on it and I rocked back and forth to make sure they were good and coming out. I don't recall how I realized it wasn't butterflies. The experience wasn't like the butterfly museums they have today where you can walk in there and tour around the plants and all the butterflies come up and land on your nose. No, that's not what happened here. As I'm expecting to see little wings glistening in the sunlight, I felt the first sting. And I thought in my little head, I didn't know butterflies hurt. Then when I looked down, I saw the yellow jackets coming up from that rock like a tornado. And I booked my little legs as fast and furious as they would run, back around the side of that house, back to the front steps. I fell up the steps, skinning both my knees. I had those little bobby socks. They were white socks with a little lace trim, and you wore them with your little shoes like your Mary Janes. And I went up those back steps, bleeding, crying, screaming, bees hanging all off of me, stinging me. 15 stings later, my family's putting me in an ice bath, trying to get the swelling down and praying I wasn't allergic. No one ever had an allergy test back then, like for bees. I remember having these large welts, pain, burning, stinging sensations everywhere. And my grandmother put my undressed body out on a cold sheet. It was obviously summertime, so I don't know how she chilled the sheet. Maybe she put it in the freezer for a while. I don't really know. But she put that sheet on a bed, and then I laid in it. And she told me to go to sleep. I do believe they gave me some kind of medication, but I don't know what it was. I know they didn't call a doctor to the house, and I know they didn't take me anywhere to see a doctor. Years later, when I was around 25 or so, maybe a little older, I got entangled with another yellow jacket nest. That was my own fault, though. That was my own doing. You see, there were these bees flying up out of the basement window. There was a tiny little hole in the basement window. I think one of my uncles shot it out with a BB gun. So I took a dandelion root, plucked that right out of the earth, and I took the root part thinking I was so smart, and I plugged that little hole. I didn't think about the bees that were flying around outside. I was just thinking about the yellow jackets that were coming out of the hole. I wasn't thinking about the ones that were already out of the hole. And they chased me. Yellow jackets will chase you down. And they stung me up. Then fast forward until when my daughter was about 6 months old. This is 3 or more decades later. And my little daughter is 6 months old. My grandfather was walking his little dog. He had that dog on a little leash and a little harness. And he was walking that dog around. So when my grandfather was walking that little dog, I came out of the house with my daughter and I was holding her, and he had bought her this little bonnet. So she was all dressed up in this little outfit with the little bonnet on, and I wanted to show him how cute she looked. And he said, "Oh, come here, let me have her sit on my lap." So he sat down on the old well, and I handed him my daughter. Now, what I didn't know was the dog was on the other side of the well because the leash was long enough to reach so the dog could walk around. And the dog saw some bumblebees in a hole in the old well. The dog was a yapper by nature. He was yipping, yapping all the time. We ignored that. We just thought he's a dog. That's what he does. Well, to our surprise, here comes a bumblebee, and it was a pretty big size one, and it came up, and it went around my grandfather's lap and stung my daughter right over the lip. Now, of course, that was terrifying to me because I had never experienced a child getting stung by a bee before except myself, and this was my daughter. She was only 6 months old. My grandfather felt terrible, even though, it wasn't his fault, but he felt terrible. The difference here you see is when I got stung up as a little girl and I was stung up from head to toe, my grandmother iced the sheets, put me in a cold bed, and observed me overnight, right? When my daughter got stung by a bee, her lip swelled slightly. I wanted to make sure she was okay, with anaphylactic shock and all, so I drove her to the emergency room. And I was like, there's a problem here. My daughter was stung by a bee. And they said, oh, well, let us get her in for observation because she's so young. That's what we did. We stayed there for about 2.5 hours. They watched her. Nothing else came of it. Her little lip swelling went down. She had stopped crying. She wasn't even blotchy from crying. She was perfectly fine. They sent us home with a clean bill of health, said she'd be okay. But the lady there, I think it was the nurse, she said to me, now listen, when a baby is stung by a bee and they're 6 months old or less, they have a greater chance of developing an allergy to bee stings. So if she gets stung again, she could have anaphylactic reactions. Years later, I get this packet of documents sent home in her little backpack. I open it up. There's like 25 pages, all different colored, that they want me to read and sign and return within 1 week. The first one I pull out is from the school nurse. And it says something like bee sting allergy permission sheet. And I'm like, permission sheet for what? What are they talking about? I didn't understand it. It was ambiguous language. Something about the doctor had to sign off to allow them to have Benadryl on file in the lockdown nurse's file cabinet for some reason or other. And I thought, what is this? They must send this to everyone. Then I thought back to the time my daughter was stung by the bee. And I thought, that can't be. I never told them that she had a bee sting. What? What is going on here? I called that school nurse and I said, what is going on with this sheet? What is this about? And she said, if your child has a bee sting allergy, we need to keep Benadryl in a drawer here on lockdown just in case. My first reaction was, doesn't Benadryl have an expiration date? Like, what if I get a Benadryl bottle and I bring it to you, but it expires halfway through the school year? She goes, then you'd have to sign another sheet and bring another bottle. Okay, and why am I doing this? I'm sorry, I'm confused. I don't recall my mama or grandmother bringing Benadryl or having a sheet signed to tell anybody I needed Benadryl if I was stung by a bee, because I was stung a lot. So the nurse said the doctor will have to sign this sheet if your child has a bee sting allergy. And then I asked the question. I shouldn't have asked the question, but I did. And I did this to myself again. I opened this can of worms. I opened this can of worms that lasted and lasted and lasted for years. I said, how would I know if my daughter has a bee sting allergy? Now, I thought I was taking the smart road. That's not the smart thing to say. The smart thing to say is ignore it and not fill it out. unless your child really does have a bee sting allergy, and then it's imperative to fill that out because you don't want your child to go without Benadryl if they need it on the playground. And the nurse said, has your daughter ever been stung by a bee? I didn't think it would be smart to lie about that, but I didn't really think it would be impactful or make a difference. She was 6 months old. She wasn't in school. What did that have to do with anything? So I said, my daughter was stung by a bee when she was 6 months old. My grandfather was holding her on the well, and his little dog was chasing the bees out of the hole, and we didn't realize it until she was stung in the lip. Oh, she was stung in the lip? The nurse went wild. I said, oh dear, what did I just say? I did it again. I opened my mouth. I should have said nothing. And the nurse said, if she was stung before or while she was 6 months old, there is a 10 times chance that if she ever gets stung again, she's going to be allergic. We need that Benadryl. Well, now I'm panicking because I'm like, oh my goodness, what if she gets stung in the meantime before I even get to the doctor's office to have the note signed? I called the pediatrician's office and I said, I'm in a pickle. Is this something your doctor could sign today? And the pediatrician said, yeah. And my daughter had been going there since birth, so it shouldn't have been an issue, and it wasn't. I drove over there, and it was like a 25-minute drive. I get there, I go in, I have that paper, and I said, oh, I am so grateful the doctor's in today because I've been scared this whole time that my daughter was going to get stung by a bee on the playground today, and they wouldn't have been able to give her Benadryl. And the nurse was like, that is ridiculous. I said, it is, isn't it? But hey, what do I know? So the doctor came out and he signed that paper, but they collected a $10 fee because that was above and beyond a regular checkup appointment. So because of that, they charge you a fee for that. So I had to pay a $10 fee for that. And then the nurse said I had to go get my own Benadryl. They don't supply it. Okay, so I raced down to the nearest CVS pharmacy that I could find. The nurse didn't want the pill form. She wanted the liquid. I didn't even know you could get Benadryl in a liquid, but I got it, and it was a big bottle. And I thought this will last all year, just in case she gets stung up more than once. So I bring the bottle, I bring that permission slip, and I bring it to the nurse. Done. I was so proud of myself. And that nurse looked at me and she goes, okay, I'm going to put it right here in the file cabinet. Thank you very much. And I was like, you're welcome. Following year, my daughter brings that notebook home again. Guess what? Same paperwork. Same exact paperwork. I said, what's this? I already signed this last year. Is it a matter of a new bottle of Benadryl? I can do that. But I don't want to have to do this every single year. I got to pay for this. And I said, we don't even know if you're allergic to bees and you were never stung last year. So why am I doing this? And my daughter said, Mom, you got to do it. It's required. I called that nurse up again. I said, nurse, listen, we went through all this last year. You almost caused me a panic attack, okay? My child never even got stung by a bee. And here we are year 2. What is going on? Well, we have to do this every year. And whether or not the Benadryl is expired doesn't matter. It gets thrown out at the end of the year and we need a new bottle. You threw out that Benadryl. Couldn't I have come and got it? That was like $10. And she was like, no, that's the way we do it here. You have to provide a new bottle of Benadryl at the beginning of the year. I had to go back to the doctor, pay another fee, and go back to the CVS pharmacy, get another big bottle of Benadryl, and bring it all down to the school nurse. By now, the following year, my child is like 8 or 9 years old. I'm tired of this race. This is ridiculous. She's never even been stung by a bee. Get that same packet in the mail. Here we go again. But I did it because it was my daughter's last year in that school, and she wouldn't be having to deal with that school nurse. So I thought, good, we're out of there. It's golden. She's going on to another school next year. We're good. I don't have to ever do this again. So I'll just go along with it and I'll do it this one more time. She ends up going to the new school. Right away, the new nurse reaches out to me by phone. She says, hi, we understand that your daughter has a bee allergy. No, that's not true. We don't know if she has a bee allergy. And the nurse said, wait, you don't know if your daughter has a bee allergy? I said, no, we don't know that. I said, she got stung when she was around 6 months old. Ever since then, we've been bringing a doctor's note with a big bottle of Benadryl because that's what the nurse said we have to do. And we've been doing this every year, but I thought switching schools, it would stop. My daughter has never been stung by a bee again. So the nurse said, well, seeing that your daughter was stung before 6 months old or so, that heightens the chance of her being allergic if she ever was stung. I said, let me tell you something. This has been going on for years. You're telling me I'm going to have to do this for the rest of her school days? Like every single year until she graduates, I'm going to have to go to the doctor, race around like a nut, getting this stuff and bringing it, and then throw it out at the end of the year, whether it's bad or good. And she said, there is a way to conclude this. I said, yeah, withdraw my daughter and move? I don't know. What's the way to conclude this? She said, get her tested. I said, get her tested. She said, yeah, you have to go to an allergist for that. Well, that was a whole nother day. So now the school's going to be starting. And they literally told me, if she doesn't have that paperwork and the Benadryl in that file cabinet before the first day of school, my daughter couldn't go to school. First day of school in a new school. Imagine that. I called the allergist that I used. This doctor said, no, we don't treat pediatrics. That's a whole different doctor group. You're going to have to go to a pediatric allergist. It's a specialist. Okay, help me out here. Where do I find a pediatric specialist allergist? Come to find out, it was all the way on the other side of the state. That was like an hour and a half drive. I'm like, you're telling me I got to take her an hour and a half way to get a test to see if she has a bee allergy? He said, yes, that's the only way we can prove whether or not she's allergic. Wow. Okay. School is like in 4 days, and they already told me she can't be admitted without this information. Either I provide a doctor's note and a huge bottle of Benadryl for the school year, or I get the test and the results in 4 days to let them know I don't have to do this. But if I don't get that test, she will have to do this every single year she's in school. And there were a lot of years left at that point. We get to the pediatric specialist allergist. And they said, well, we've got to have her for observation. I don't recall, it was years ago. I don't recall if it was a full day of staying there and waiting, or if it was overnight. I really don't recall. I just remember nothing happened, which meant she had no bee allergy. And they tested her for all kinds of things. Hornets, wasps, bees, yellow jackets, all these different species they tested her for. And every single thing came back. She does not have a bee allergy. Then they expedited a letter to me, which I thought was gracious of them. And it said, your daughter does not have a bee allergy. But then they also said the test is not 100% conclusive because while we tested her for da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, there still may be a species we didn't test for her. And in the future, if she's stung by that species, she may have an allergic reaction. I thought, oh dear, this isn't going to work. The school nurse is going to see that and pick right up on it. Because they fight with precision. School nurses are trained. They have laser eye beams. And they know if something's not right, they don't fall for it. Even I wasn't falling for it at this point because I was like, oh no, they're going to make me bring that bottle of Benadryl every single year. So the school nurse read that letter and she did in fact say, this isn't good enough. If they didn't test her for every single species known to man, nope, we're not taking any chances. And I said, come on now, that's a little bit ridiculous, don't you think? And the school nurse says, nope, that's the way it is. It's your daughter's health we're concerned about. Wouldn't you be concerned if she got a bee sting and we didn't even know if she was allergic? So I went back to the pediatrician. I got the note signed. I got the big bottle of Benadryl from CVS. But then finally, she was in a different grade altogether, which meant she got transferred to middle school. Once she got there, they didn't even ask. They asked for no proof at all. I didn't want to reach out to the nurse because I was afraid to. I was like, oh, no, I'm not even opening that can of worms. I'm not mentioning it. And I told her, if you ever get stung by a bee, you don't go to the school nurse. You call me. You call me and we'll take care of it. I'll take you right to the emergency room. But don't talk to the nurse about this because I don't need to go through this the rest of your life. And she was like, okay. And she's never, ever been stung by a bee. Since then, I've been stung up several times. Working in my garden, working outside. I've been stung by yellow jackets, bumblebees, you name it. It happens. I just think back to those days when I got stung up so bad and the remedy was a frozen sheet taken from the freezer and my little lifeless body laid upon it with all my bee welts. But here I am. I'm a survivor. Thanks for watching. Take care.